Ele que é responsável por liderar toda a força de trabalho da NASA. Robert também foi CHRO do Departamento de Energia do governo americano e, como ex-membro da Marinha, detém inúmeras condecorações em gestão. É graduado em gestão pela Universidade de Washington, com doutorado pela George Mason University. Vem ao Brasil pela primeira vez com exclusividade. Por favor, uma salva de palmas. Robert Gibbs.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. That's a very warm welcome. I think it's a little undeserved, but I really appreciate it. I did learn that I am between now and drinking later. So thank you. Good night. All right, maybe we'll talk a little bit more than that. I think we find ourselves in human capital at a very interesting time. Change is here, right? When we talk about these things, whether it's being driven by technology, whether it's external threats or opportunities, or organizations trying to be more adaptive, more flexible to their mission, to the things that they have to accomplish, I will tell you that if you're not thinking in terms of transformation and change at this point in time for your organization, you might be falling behind a little bit. Let me start with if you could show the first video, and we can kind of talk a little bit more about change.
Ignition sequence start. All engines are running.
We have taken tremendous steps.
We choose to go to the moon before this decade is out.
We have achieved the earth-shaking, the breathtaking, the groundbreaking,
One small step for man,
and left a mark in the heavens. Our successes build one upon another and amplify what is possible.
The dawn of Orion.
It's time we take the next great leap. We're building the next chapter of American exploration, returning to the moon to stay, so we can go beyond to Mars, to expand what's possible and further our understanding. The architecture for these missions is already taking shape. We will go with new systems, bold designs, and a sustainable mission. You can hear it, taste it, touch it. We are going. We are training, testing, pressing our pioneering spirit into every component, defining our resolve with every line of code, and securing our success with every welcomed partnership. This is not hypothetical. This is not about flags and footprints. This is about sustainable science and feeding forward the advance of the human spirit. Because we are the pioneers, the star sailors, the thinkers, the visionaries, the doers. And because we stand on the shoulders of giants to go farther than humanity has ever been, we will add our names to the rolls of the greatest adventurers in history. Every day, every mission, we advance this calling. We are NASA. And after 60 years, we're just getting started.
Thank you. Now tell me I don't have the coolest job in the world. I mean, that's inspirational every time I see it. What I'd like to talk to you a little bit about today is managing in transition in times of change. If you just saw that last video, do you think we were thinking that we're going back to the moon to have the first woman, the next man, put their boots on the moon by 2024, 5 years ago? 10 years ago? 15 years ago? That wasn't our mission space. That wasn't what we were doing. If you're looking for sort of a definition of change, and an organization has to have the ability to change its size and composition to be successful as they go forward, NASA is a pretty good place to look at it. Our mission space, the things that it's not really a pun. I didn't mean to say space in that sense. Our mission priorities change. So right now, our entire agency is around that singular purpose of getting the first woman, the next man to the moon by 2024. It's a pretty daunting challenge. But we have to have the ability to transform our organization to achieve these priorities. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some basic principles, some things that I've learned as you're pursuing transformation, some must-haves, some things you must do, and maybe some things you should probably try to avoid. So I think the first concept that we have to kind of get our heads around is understanding the reason, right? Understanding your business case. Do you really know your business? If you're looking to pursue transformation, specifically in human capital, in your people business, do you know all of the aspects of your business? Do you know cost, efficiency? Do you know what your customers are saying? If you don't have this baseline, it's very hard to measure progress as you go forward. Do you know if you have the right structure? Does your structure support your organization values, its priorities, the things that it has to accomplish in a way that's consistent with its culture? I think about half of the organizations that I talk to, and at NASA we have a lot of folks that ask for benchmarking, exchange, comparison sort of thing. About half the folks I've talked to fail at this step. They don't really understand their core business, their core purpose. What does it really look like? Now, as you'll see behind me, one of the principles in really understanding this is people. You know, it's absolutely amazing that this conversation is around, it's all about people. Because that is a core value at NASA. We have great technology. We have remarkable projects, life-changing missions, programs, all of those things. Without people, we're not very successful. I think you'll see that as a core theme going on in the slides behind me. The second core principle of transformation. Once you understand your own business, you understand how it all fits together, and you really know that part of the business, do you know what your reason for change is? What's the big so what? If we change, what will it result in? Do you know your reason for changing? If you don't, if you cannot clearly communicate, we need to transform for the following reasons to achieve some end result, clearly in 30 seconds, start over. You're not there. You're not ready for transformation. At NASA, we talk about transforming the human capital practice to give us a sustainable advantage in the people business. For all the folks you see behind me, to give us competitive advantage not only today, but going forward. So I think, and I can't emphasize this enough, as you're looking at this opportunity of sort of going through these periods of transformation, you got to know your business and you got to know your why. Now we need to talk a little bit about the how. And I want to give you a couple of basic concepts. I think there's an absolute maximum that you have to be wary of as you're going through transformation or managing in times of transition. And what I'm talking about, an organization's capacity for change is a very limited number. It's some number, it's some aspect of saying it can only do so much over a given period of time. If you exceed pushing transformation faster than that, you invite risk and you invite failure. I think that's a principle that sometimes when you say, hey, got to get this done, do more with less, which I think is another fiction, but that's another for another time. There it goes. And he's taking pictures now. I don't know. So I think you have to understand your capacity for change. I think you also... Hello? This thing's kind of funny. I feel like I'm like a telephone operator. I don't know. So you also have to understand that there's also a minimum momentum you have to maintain as you're going through transformation. There is a sort of pace to transformation. If you take too long in going through transformation, if you're not successful in delivering what you're going to set out to deliver, you'll lose momentum and transformation will suffer. There's another very important principle here that I think we all have to recognize as human capital professionals and others, certainly leadership, that while transformation and transition is an organizational priority, it happens on an individual level. And everyone experiences. All right, so I'm going to talk really loud because I don't think this is working. So everyone experiences organizational transformation at an individual level. You guys hear me? Okay, good. Operator ready Okay. Hello? Okay. This is much better, I think. So everyone experiences change on a very individual level. You have to respect that. You have to understand that. You have to communicate that way. Not everyone's going to be on board right from the very beginning. One of the do-nots that I would tell you is don't assume you have support across your organization for change. Don't take that for granted. You have to communicate. You have to communicate all the time. And, in leading this transformation effort at NASA over the last couple of years, I've probably done 500 different outreach visits. I visit every center. NASA has 10 centers, if you don't know this, across the U.S., at least twice a year. I meet with all of the employees. I meet with the human capital groups. I meet with leadership. I meet with unions to talk about what we're doing and why we're doing it, to remember that their understanding and their acceptance and their help and their advocacy in the transformation process, the people understanding what you're doing and why, kind of helps determine success or failure. So I think that's absolutely critical that you understand, and leadership really understands. You can't communicate enough. I would tell you I've done all of those things, and I probably didn't do enough. So it's one of those things I hope that we can talk more about as we go forward. So one of the things I think we talk about, the must-haves. Let's talk about some things you must have to be successful at transformation. One, you got to know your business case. I've listened to some of the presentations today, and I think they've hit on a lot of really good points. But I would tell you, from a human capital perspective, you have to be able to walk in and explain to leadership, this is why I'm doing this is why we need to do this from a business perspective. When you talk about attrition, you should have a much more nuanced conversation than saying, I lose about 3.5% of my workforce. You should be able to talk and say, you know what? I'm losing my workforce to this place. We're losing them because of these reasons, whether it's compensation, work life, whatever it might be. And I think this will get us back in the market if we take these steps. Again, it's about delivering value to your organization's mission. So if you understand the cost, the efficiency, the effectiveness, I will tell you that your presentations for leadership will go a lot better. Without leadership, and getting to another must-have, it won't succeed. You have to get leadership on your side. You have to get them understanding that this is incredibly important to the success of the organization. And these are the things that we have to do and be able to defend those things. I think sometimes as a community we forget the business case. My advice to you is know it forwards and back. Make sure you completely understand it as you go forward. Another must-have as you're looking at transformation is transparency. You have to be willing to have honest conversations. Be fully transparent. Some people won't be on board at the beginning, but I think they'll appreciate the honest conversation about where you're going and why. You have to make hard decisions. I would say do those transparently. There are a lot of decisions along the path that you'll have to make. And if your folks see you making them in a transparent manner, I think they'll understand and appreciate what you're talking about. May not always agree with the decision, but they'll appreciate the openness. I think you should adopt a principle I call best idea should win. When we looked at transformation at NASA and where we ended up as an organizational structure at the end, as opposed to where we started and thought we were going, is a very different place. But we allowed the best ideas to come from anywhere in the organization. You couldn't be wed to sacred cows. If you think of the alternative, if you walk in day one and say it's going to look like this, it's going to behave like this, and this is what it's going to look like at the end, and you don't allow yourself to learn during the process, you end up with a much more inferior product in my estimation. I think as you go through this process, giving your folks the opportunity to voice their concerns. Again, it's a transparency, it's a communication, it's a lot of different principles as you're going forward with it. But giving them the voice sometimes really helps understanding, acceptance, and advocacy as you go forward. I think from my perspective, in talking a little bit about some of the do-nots, I will tell you, do not assume support across the board and that it's at the same stage, at the same time, at all parts and process of the transformation. A lot of times, you start off in one place, and you'll slide back, and you'll go forward. It's not a linear process. Transformation and change just isn't a linear process. You know, you'll have upswings and you'll have times when you reach plateaus. You have to be able to manage through all of those different periods within transition. I would also make sure that you understand that transformation, and I hope you all if there's one thing you really want to take away from this presentation, it might be this. It's not for the weak of heart, and it's not for the half-committed. It's hard work. You're asking a lot of your folks, you're asking a lot of your organization. Understand that. Expect that. It's a tough process. But if you're not fully committed to the organization, to the goals, to the things you're pursuing, I would suggest maybe you're better off not pursuing something like this. So hopefully that's something that'll stick with you after this presentation. I would also say there are a lot of other sort of things that we can talk as we go through some of the question and answer period as to best practices, things we've tried, things that have succeeded and things that have failed. There's a concept, and we had a great conversation at lunch with some of the speakers called assuming positive intent. To me, this is another absolutely critical sort of thing that makes NASA a little bit different, but not completely. On my first day when I came to NASA, our administrator sat me down and goes, "Bob, I want you to remember one thing as you're here at NASA. Assume positive intent." And what does that mean? It means when you're working with someone who's sitting across the table and you're having a meeting with your colleague or whatever it might be, you assume they're working on the right things for the right reasons. This positive aspect of the workplace, of the mission, of the people, of the organization is absolutely life-changing if you can adopt to it. If you can get yourself around this idea, I'm telling you it's a great experience. It allows you to work on the right things for the right things, to put ego and emotion aside and really work on the substance of the issues. I think it's incredibly important. And again, I think it's hopefully one of those things you'll take away from this presentation as we go forward. So, we talked a little bit about transformational change, talked a little bit about some of the whys, knowing your business, certainly knowing not only your business but your purpose. We talked a little bit about some must-haves and some things that we probably shouldn't do. With that, I'm going to ask that we open the floor for questions. We're going to see some videos going on behind me at some point. I think maybe this might be a great point to play our second video.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Thank you, Bob. We open for questions now,
Yeah.
using the platform. Ok, então, pessoal, esse é o código 497358, é o código. Envie suas perguntas, a gente tem um bom tempo aí até às 6 horas e vamos tentar responder o maior número possível. Lembrem de votar também nas perguntas preferidas, tá bom? So,
I have no idea what any of that says.
I will translate to you.
Okay.
How to manage people of different cultures in company.
You need to change that?
Yes.
How to manage people with different cultures.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Managing different cultures or generations, I think it's kind of getting at some of the same questioning. You know, I would tell you that I think every generation that comes into the workforce is a little bit different. I will tell you, I think the generation coming into the workforce right now may have more significant differences than maybe some of the predecessors. They're looking for something different, right? They're looking for a different experience. They're looking for a lot of variety in their experience. They're looking for some control over their lives, and they don't want to wait 30 years to achieve a different position in the organization. All of that being said, the commitment to the work, you know, the commitment to the mission, all of these things, I think is kind of the same. So I think you have to start with the organizational priorities and manage from there. That's what answers.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, the second one, how to engage leadership and deal with possible resistance of the organization during the organizational change.
I think you have to get leadership on your side. If you talk about human capital, we're very passionate as an organization, as a community of practice. Sometimes we don't always dig as deep into the data as we probably need to. We reformed part of our business at NASA, sort of the pre-hiring things, where it used to take us about 30 days, bringing technology in, doing some process reform and some other things that we did to shorten the process. It's now a 30-minute process. So if you shorten that pre-hiring window from 30 days to 30 minutes, you hire 1,000 people a year, 30,000 work days, that's 100 man-years of effort that can be rededicated onto mission, onto the organization's priorities. That sort of a conversation as you're trying to get leadership to understand what you're pursuing, I think is very powerful.
Yeah. What's the next jump? I don't know. The next step for HR on development of HR?
I think for the next step, obviously I think most organizations are looking at automation and things like that, machine learning. At NASA, we've been using bots for about a decade to help process some of our things. So I think it's further automation of transactional work so you can allow greater attention on the human side of what you're doing. I think that's one of them. I think then if you look at leveraging data and really digging into the data using data scientists and others to really understand what it's telling you, there's another level of understanding in the data that you probably have sitting in every one of your organizations. You've got to figure out the process by which you can extract that information.
Okay. The next one. What regular or traditional companies can learn with NASA experience with people?
I think there are some principles at NASA that any organization can learn from. For a long time, NASA has been the best place to work. This will be our 8th year in a row when it gets announced in December. And people ask, well, how can we be more like NASA? I think that's maybe the wrong question. We talked a little bit with the CEOs last night about this.
Yep.
You know, I think you should be looking at some of the principles behind what we do. You know, we have a mission that matters, that has importance. We've got people that truly, truly care about the mission, and you have leadership that cares about its people. Those are some very basic principles that you can apply in your organization. And this kind of gets into another sort of must-have. Whatever solution you develop, it has to work within your culture. It has to be something that's, you know, that's helpful for you to understand. Taking what we do at NASA and importing it to any other organization probably wouldn't work. But taking some of the principles that we use at NASA and importing those and interpreting those so it fits within your cultural boundaries, that probably will work.
Okay. This helps a lot. What's your biggest challenge on people management at NASA?
Wow, that's kind of a loaded question. Who asked this? I want to know who asked this question. So you're trying to get me in trouble, or is this just a nice thing? I love working at NASA, and I love all of the people equally. I say that to my kids, too. I'm not sure they buy it either. No, I would tell you some of our biggest challenges is we have been successful for a really long period of time at what we do. So positioning the agency for change, selling the need and the case for change is very hard. You know, never underestimate the forces of status quo. When you're going through a transformation or transition, they're very powerful. They're very powerful. But I will tell you that persistence in communication, persistence of purpose, and being willing to have honest conversations, you can get by all of that.
Excellent. How the policy of risk-taking or mistaking acceptation in a company like NASA that deals with people's lives?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at risk, you know, you always hear that very famous NASA line, you know, failure is not an option. Well, it kind of is. You know, I will tell you that in things that were not involving safety of person or of equipment in place and things like that, failure is an option. In fact, if you're not failing in some of the things that you're trying, then I'm not sure you're really pushing the envelope hard enough. Now, all of that stops when we start talking about personnel safety. We start talking about lives. Whole different discussion. But in things, in some of our science and some of our aerospace work, we actually have awards for failure. They say, you know what? You tried something that was really inventive. It was really leading edge. Didn't work out, but we learned in the process. So I hate to, you know, get rid of that great line from many of the movies, but failure kind of can be an option as long as you're willing to learn from it and you're not putting anyone at risk.
I believe that you already answered that. It's about innovation in HR by NASA and the future of this area or the organization. I don't know if you want to add something.
Yeah, I mean, when we went through our transformation, we realized that we weren't creating enough space for the human capital organization to be innovative. I mean, I've established a small group within NASA that is sort of research and development for human capital. It's my talent strategy and innovation group. I think they do some very cutting-edge things. You know, if 1 out of every 3 things that they propose and things that they work on comes to fruition, super. But just to give you an example, we looked at a performance management application that allows the managers, to type in comments and conversations they have with their employees, and that automatically gets fed into the performance management process. So they don't have to log into a computer, go through another access, go through another system, put information. If they have a quick conversation, and then at the end of the year, all these conversations are recorded to help the record of performance management. And that's just one example. There are many, many others that we've pushed in as far as human capital R&D.
Okay. How do you hire astronauts? Do you use any education recruiting, like to educate and recruit people?
We don't have to do a lot of recruiting for astronauts, surprisingly enough. All we do is kind of open the vacancy, and 20,000 people apply. So if you think we need more, well, okay. And you know, it's a really weird process, right? It's the most selective job that I think in the world, that we get so many applications and so many people applying to. It's a great process. It's a very interesting process. You know, you're looking for people to fit within a mission, the things that they're trying to do. About half are sort of flight-oriented, and the other half are science-oriented. So it's, you know, it's one of those things. It's, that makes NASA unique, special, and working with astronauts is always a little challenging. They're a little high maintenance. Is this being recorded? I don't want this. Let's not record this. But they're absolutely fascinating. I love them all equally.
How about this goal to take the first woman to the moon? What's the importance of that?
I think that's critical. I think that's super important for a lot of ways. You know, some of the missions of NASA, it's for the benefit of all mankind, right? Inspiration, engagement, you know, innovation, all of these things for all of mankind. And I think having the first woman to, you know, to go to the moon will be inspiring for generations. You know, I'm always interested when I talk with other technical companies and other folks about their recruiting practices. And I'm like, what have you done to eliminate bias, whether conscious or unconscious? Tell me about those sorts of things. I think our challenge is too demanding, our science is too unforgiving for me not to get the best from everyone. To me, to eliminate half of the population because they're a certain sex or whatever, for any reason. Really, it's about your qualifications, it's about your ability to do the job. That's where we kind of start and finish. And we put some things in practice and in place to ensure we don't bring some of those biases that we all have to the selection process.
What differs the selection of new professionals from NASA from other companies? What's the purpose, what's the importance of purpose on that process of hiring?
Yeah, I guess some background on what NASA really looks like, right? What you would call your NASA employee, we have about 17,000 federal employees. That's not our whole workforce, that's about 1/3. 2/3 of our workforce are contractors and others. We also have 125 international partnerships and 700 commercial partnerships. So if you look at the entire total workforce of NASA, it's something very different. So there's lots of opportunity for folks to be engaged and come to work for NASA, but I will tell you it's a remarkably competitive process. We get about 300 applications for every person we select. We're more selective than Harvard.
While SpaceX opens their technologies to the world, we still see NASA with Pandora box. What's the relation between you guys? Is there any technology exchange?
Yeah, so most of what we do is open and free to the public, right? Very, very small, maybe 5% of what we do is actually in a classified environment. SpaceX is a partner of ours. They're using our launch facilities, they're using our safety, our security, they use a lot of our technology, and we're perfectly fine with it. You know, if we can develop that collaboration, I think that pushes science further. I think that's a good thing for everybody. Again, it's a period of transition or change. If you think back, you know, you saw the video at the beginning. If you think back 20 years ago, we were 100% of the market. We didn't collaborate with anyone internationally, really. We didn't do much in the partnership world. I don't think we could have envisioned that 25 years later, we'd be about 25% of the market and have all of these collaborative partnerships and agreements and arrangements with so many organizations across countries and across national boundaries and across public-private sector boundaries as well. But again, it's adapting to change. It's understanding how are we going to be successful going forward? How are we going to accomplish the mission?
Okay. How do you engage leadership and deal with possible resistance in the organization during the change of the organization? Or
yeah, I think there's a big part of this that's relationship-based. You know, have you spent the time to really understand what was going on? Before we kicked off our transformation effort, I went to every center and met with every leader and I met with every employee in human capital specifically to really understand from their perspective the problems they were facing. I sometimes get concerned when you see transformative efforts that are directed from the top down without any feedback from the bottom up. So I think if you want to get leadership on your side, you have to develop that relationship. You have to understand what the problems are from their perspective, not yours. The human capital very often will find itself looking outward without really looking inward too. You know, having a directional view of how things are being perceived by your customers, however you want to define those, by your stakeholders, however you want to define those. You know, part of my job is I also work for our administration, so sometimes having these conversations at the most senior level of our government, and they've never bothered to think about it from the other direction, and I think it's incredibly important that they do.
okay. How about your education and your Navy experience? How was important for your executive career?
Yeah, that's, well, this is a funny story I shouldn't be sharing publicly, but what the heck, we'll say it. So I was a young naval officer, and I had a 4-star admiral, highest rank in the United States Navy, was my boss, and I was a budget and finance director building submarines and aircraft carriers. Huge budget and all the rest of it, and things are going pretty well. He called me in his office, and he said, "Commander, I want you to take over our people business." I said, "Sir, respectfully, I don't like people that much." He then said, "Commander, do you see an RSVP at the bottom of this invitation?" And I said, "I'm leaving, sir." He goes, "Get out of my office, go do the people business." And that's kind of how I got started. So I walked downstairs to the military and civilian personnel office, and it looked like they were burning a village. People are shredding stuff. They heard about this commander that was coming down. Chaos, people are quitting. And my executive officer at the time was one of those guys you see in all the movies who's been everywhere, done everything. And he had some rather interesting words to say to me at that point in time, like, "Boy, I wouldn't want to be you right now." So that's how it all started. That's how it kind of started for me. And I will tell you, I found very quickly that I had a passion for people, for helping people succeed. You know, if you look at the definition of success, it's allowing everyone in the organization to succeed, making it possible for every person to succeed. So that's kind of how it got started. And, you know, I find myself very lucky 15 years later working at NASA.
Yeah. We have time for 2 more questions. What NASA have been doing for increasing diversity? You talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I think if you're not pursuing some measure of diversity, then you're probably not paying attention. You know, I think diversity adds a lot to everything that you do. I think, you know, looking for people with different, and I look at diversity in a very, well, in the big D sort of way, your life experiences, everything that makes you you. My deputy at NASA couldn't be more different from me, and I'm thankful every day that I have her. She's a theater major who studied in London and all of these things. She thinks very differently. She sees problems very differently. She's much nicer than I am. I mean, there's a lot of things that she brings to the table that I don't necessarily bring. But boy, what a great team that makes, you know? So it's leveraging that diversity as a management team to be successful. And that's just one example. When you're looking at diversity, think of life experiences more than the narrowly defined demographic boxes would be my advice.
And the last one, how do you prepare for crisis situations like accidents?
So that's a great question. When you're looking in a crisis, I've always believed that you will perform in a crisis the way you have prepared. I think you have to go through, and we do this a lot at NASA, what is the worst possible thing that could happen, and work your way through that. We do a lot of continuing operations, COOP exercises at NASA. So if something were bad to happen, you know, how are we going to react? You know, knowing where we go. How does the organization continue to function? Those sorts of things. And I think there's a lesson in there for a lot of folks that, you know, don't wait until you're in a crisis to develop relationships with your community, your stakeholders, whatever it might be. Because if you do, at that point, it might be too late.
Okay. So your final message for the audience?
Well, I think we find ourselves at a very interesting time. It is a time of great opportunity, and a lot will be asked of the human capital profession. But I think if we approach this in a way that we understand the needs of the organization, the needs of our folks, of our people, and we understand the ways we can help support that, and understand that our mission in human capital is to make every person in our organization successful. If we understand that, if we assume positive intent, and look at things for the way they really are and communicate, I think you can drive an important transformation that's coming. Whether it's to your organization or not, it's coming.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Gibbs. Thank you, Bob. Thank you a lot. I'd like to ask you to stay here on the stage.
Yeah.
We will invite everybody from CHRO staff to come here for our finishing.
Except Philip. He's trouble.
Então, pessoal, antes de encerrar, eu queria convidar todo o staff da CHRO para vir aqui no palco, também os palestrantes que participaram com a gente. Nicole, please come back to the stage. Luiz, And os outros palestrantes também. Luciana, se tiver ainda, por favor, venham ao palco junto com a equipe da CHRO. É um trabalho de time, é muita gente envolvida. Não somos uma empresa de eventos, então desculpem qualquer coisa, mas fizemos o nosso melhor aí, trabalhamos bastante. E é um time grande aí, como vocês comentaram. A gente vai fazer essa homenagem final e aí a gente se despede e agradece mais uma vez a paciência e o interesse de todos vocês. Então, estão todos aí? Então, por favor, uma salva de palmas a todos os palestrantes e os colaboradores da CHRO. Thank you, Bob. Obrigado a todos os palestrantes, obrigado, time. Muito bom, tem ainda bastante trabalho pela frente. E vamos lá. Obrigado, gente. Até o ano que vem.